when Maryann Witty agreed to speak, we were absolutely elated as well, because Maryann said I could talk about how to secure a community plot. And when she said it really quickly, you know, it had to process, and I said, great, Maryann. And I'll just add, no, not a cemetery plot. And she said, that's perfect, Deb. She said, do you mind if I bring Cliff? And I said, absolutely not. So Maryann and Cliff are here to talk about the new programs, the gardening and the recreation programs. Thank you very much, Maryann and Cliff.
Thank you, Deborah, and I do appreciate the opportunity as I work my way beyond the map of being here. I thank the Chamber for putting this together, and I probably know a lot of you seniors out there, and if I don't know you, you probably know me, so there you go. Okay, what I'd like to do is, Cliff, I know you're behind the maps also. Cliff Seipel is our liaison, our garden liaison to the Recreation Commission. The way the Recreation Department is set up is we have 7 appointed commissioners, and I work for them and the township administrator. I've been with the town since 1976. I'm only 21, so I don't know how that worked out. But I've been here quite a while, and have had some many wonderful experiences in terms of working with the Recreation Department, and the amount of people that I've worked with, been very blessed with co-workers, volunteers, and just I think the people in Montville Township are the best, so I've been very blessed. But I'd like to, and I'll try to keep this short because I know we want to go on to dessert and other more fun things. In regards to our community gardens, the history on the gardens was when the property, the Cisco tract, was purchased from Mr. Cisco, who was a dairy farmer, and I'm sure some of you in the audience have a lot more history on that than I do. I believe it was purchased probably in the early 1970s, and the community, tract was eventually developed into a community park. At the time of the purchase, some of you may have known Al and Bev Bakken. They were Pine Brook residents and very instrumental in starting our gardening program. So the gardens actually started along Changebridge Road, right across from the junior high school, the Lazar Middle School, and that was the original location, which now has been developed into 2 community athletic fields. When the master plan was developed for the tract itself, which happened in about 1993, the gardens were moved up the hillside, to which are now our fields 3 and 4, and then were moved again into their final location. So what I have here is, initially this was the concept of the master plan of our community park. Some of it does exist, some of it doesn't. We do have a turf field along Changebridge, which is on the opposite end of our parking lot. We have 4 athletic fields. Our gardens are pretty much where they are now. But it did at one time show a ball field, which did not happen. We actually developed a very intensive and very neat playground, which is really used by people throughout the state of New Jersey. And then, of course, we have our basketball courts. We did not put any type of tennis courts in there at the time. There's a lot of activity at our community park between the bocce courts, the horseshoe pits, and what have you. But our community gardens, this is where they ended up resting as far as a final location. There are actually 110 30 by 30 plots at the site. When we started with gardening, it was somewhat a popular activity. But I cannot stress to you how this activity has exploded over the last 20 years. We now have 180 active gardeners at that site. We have taken some of our 30 by 30 plot size areas and have divided them, because some people found that a 30 by 30 area is pretty big to handle. So we have offered 15 by 30 plots and also 30 by 30 for the more avid gardeners who really are into it. With that, just a little bit of history again in regards to how these gardens developed. Mr. Bakken and his wife were instrumental in terms of really starting the gardening program. And with that, we had people like Yalmar Johansson, some of you may know him, he's one of our recreation commissioners, very active in gardening. Jim Lick, who unfortunately has since passed away, as has Al and Bev. And Ernie Niles, again, a recreation commissioner who was very active in our gardens, who unfortunately has passed away also. Joe Quaid had been a previous recreation commissioner, and he was very active in our gardens. So we've been blessed with history in terms of people who've been involved in our gardens, have seen it evolve, have since passed on, but we still have people who've been very instrumental in keeping our gardening program alive. In regards to, again, how the gardens kind of developed, when they were first put in, it was our township clerk, many of you may remember Gladys Durombeck. She's been with us 40 plus years, God bless her. She's not in the audience, is she? Okay. But it was Anna Massey who was working with Gladys, who actually did the scheduling of who got what plot. When our park started to develop, the Recreation Commission took over that responsibility. And we developed rules and regulations, and like anything, unfortunately, when government gets involved, you have to kind of follow some of the rules just so everybody's on the same page in regards to how things are operated. So we took over the scheduling of the gardens and have hence developed a registration fee. We charge $45 as a startup fee, and then there's an annual $20 activity fee. The money goes back into the gardening program, and I'll explain that in just a bit. We have, when the gardens were developed for their final resting location, we added the amenities of water to make it easier for people to water their plots. We have defined driveways. The master plan architect actually named the driveways in Carrot Court, and Eggplant Alley, and Tomato Trail, Pepper Path, which was really kind of cute. So, you know, we tried to make the area a little more established in terms of the way it was set up. Bear with me, I have to turn to page 2. Our DPW has been very involved in helping us out with the actual gardening program. They are responsible for tilling the land in the spring. They also stake out the area so people actually can find their plots. And then in the fall, they come in and they actually cut down any dead plants so that they lay fallow for the next season in the spring. We also have at the community park, along with those 110 garden plots of 30 by 30, 19 perennial plots which are not plowed. And the main reason for developing those was just so that people who wanted to grow perennial plants like strawberries, asparagus, rhubarb, had that opportunity to do so without having to worry about the plants being disturbed from year to year. Right now, again, we have 100 and, I think I told you, 180 gardeners, okay, and we do have a little bit of a turnover, no pun intended, of gardeners, whether they decide they don't want to garden anymore, maybe some of their health issues restrict them from gardening, but we ended up with 36 new gardeners this year, and then the rest that tend to come back to us every year. At this point, even though I'm supposed to be talking about how you secure a garden plot, we only have one plot that's available at our community park. It is such a popular activity that we try very hard to accommodate the waiting list. And again, that's why we break down these plots into 15 by 30 when the demand is there. So there is only one plot available at the community park for this year. If there's anyone interested in securing a garden plot, we do request that they fill out a form just so we can keep track, and we are very good about following up with that. Kelly Kehoe, who is my assistant in the recreation office, is instrumental in terms of making sure she communicates with the gardeners and trying to solve any problems. So she's the one that you really would talk to in regards to securing the plot. What had happened last year, because again the popularity of these gardens, is we actually developed an area called Indian Lane East. That's actually on the other side of town, Tawaco, heading towards Lincoln Park. Property that is owned by the township, where it was decided that we would try experimenting with organic gardening. So a gentleman by the name of Jim Muhoff, thank you Cliff, and Cliff actually were two key people in regards to developing that area. I believe the acreage might be around 10 acres or so that we have down there. It had been farmed by a previous farmer, and we decided that we would develop that area. Right now there are, I believe it's 21 or 23 active organic gardeners out of 31, and we have the capability of really increasing that area because there's so much property. The land is very fertile, so we've been very successful in terms of that area. The nice part about this area, they do have access to water, we just put water in this year for them, is the fact that just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. I'm going to blame it on my age. Talking about expansion. Oh, no, the other thing. Go ahead.
Then we fence in areas, and now the people occupy those respective plots. So by having these, by having little clusters, so to speak, you have immediate fencing for between 3 up to as many as 6 plots. The last year when we started this whole area, we were when we were authorized by the Casha committee, we only had 8 people, and they occupied the immediate sides in that area of the first lane. The reason we had growing pains was it was such a wet, snowy winter and wet spring and so on that we actually had water coming up out of the ground. So when you have water at the top of the hill, it runs down the hill, it runs across all your plots, there's a problem. But we don't expect to revisit last winter. And at that point, we put in 8 pioneering family plots. They ran water from a hydrant that was installed by DPW's wing, the water department. And the ultimate thing was they had a very successful first year, despite the growing pains that we had to go through. In fact, to the top of those 4 on each side of that lane, we could not even brush hog it, or the briar bushes that are up there became the homes of 4 red-winged blackbird nests. And so that delayed us as well. Well, irony would have it. This year, the gardens have a beach snipe. Now what it's doing up here, I think it just got caught by some tailwind, but at any rate, its eggs are on my daughter's block. Here she faithfully, while pregnant, took care of a 15 by 30 at the other end. I wanted to make sure she's not going to fall on her face. Well, the birds caused a little delay in her getting planted this year. However, with the exception of the top 4 on the left, all of the plots are currently fenced. The group immediately to the top left has been cover crop to control weeds. And so we have in the future, we hope you'll be visiting a site that you won't believe. One that we were made aware of when we went to Rodale. Rodale Institute is out near Kutztown in Pennsylvania, not far away. And they have a field of crimson clover. It is just so dramatic against the normal green that one would expect. And now there are, we put water on the first 2 lanes in the same relationship that we have at the community garden. And that worked out so well that people can drive up to their plots. We have 30-foot frontages, and water spigots are on 60-foot intervals.
Hold it right to your mouth, please.
I got to eat my bubblegum. At any rate, the upshot is that now with water in this lane to serve both sides, water in this lane serving this side, the development that is shown here in yellow would be easily served without any additional water installation. However, depending on the wait list, now unfortunately as was mentioned, Ernie Nile had passed away in July of 2010. In September I was asked to fill his space, and as a result the wait list at that point was 30 families here between Pinebrook, Montville, and Tawaka. So I immediately enlisted where we had properties. I've been on some of Maryann's recreation tours as to what we would do with properties, be they baseball, variety of other sports, rectangular sports and so on. The key was that I got to see quite a few spots. And Indian Lane always interested me, because I thought if you're ever going to have rectangular sports and have tournaments, it could be so located there that it would be the least intervening with all the traffic activities and residences and so on. It would be an ideal spot. Well, to use it for gardens worked out well.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Cliff. Cliff, as you can tell, is very detailed. God bless him. His previous life, he was an engineer, so he really gets into it. Thank you, Cliff. I just wanted to mention, and Cliff brought it up, is the fact that at the community park, any of the gardeners would have to actually fence in their own plot and then take it down every year, which is a bit cumbersome. Here at the Indian Lane East area, we actually have the whole area fenced in to keep out the wildlife, which makes it a lot easier. The other thing I wanted to mention, in tribute to Al Bakken, the plot that he had at the community park, when he started to fail in health, he had a couple of friends that would help him garden. And when he passed, it was decided by one of those friends to have the high school actually start a lifestyles gardening program. So they've taken his plot and in memory to Al have kept that plot going and made it part of their curriculum at the high school, which I think is a wonderful tribute to a man who really was instrumental again in regards to that gardening program. The other thing I just want to mention to you is that one of the future developments at Indian Lane is we want to take those lanes that access the garden plots, similar to what we had done over at the community park with the cute names of Eggplant Alley and Tomato Trail, actually name them after people who were instrumental in the program for gardening. So we do hope to have a Bakken Lane and a Quaid Court, whatever the case may be, as a tribute. Yeah, you have a question? All right. Okay. Are we holding off on questions? Okay. Not a problem. And I really didn't plan on making this any longer than like... Okay. But I have a question here, so go ahead. You walk the community park. Go ahead. Okay, the question is, at the community park, and I'm sure people have seen it elsewhere, disposable plastic bottles, because, you know, people throw bottles away, and we're supposed to be recycling, but they tend to throw them on the ground. I don't know how to answer that for you, and I do appreciate you bringing it to my attention, and I appreciate the fact that you pick them up. I think that's great. But as to how do you get people to use the garbage receptacles and the recycling? I would agree, but I think the coaches are the culprits also. I think people are so used to having people pick up after them that they just think it's a given. Okay, but I do appreciate that comment. Let me wrap this up. The other thing, too, in regards to our garden program is we do hope in the future to develop Breland Avenue. That is a property that's across the street from the Longview condominiums, the Longview area. We own that property also, and the intent is really to try to develop various pockets of gardens throughout town just to make it easier for people to access them. And then just in terms of wrapping things up, I would like to just a quick commercial. Besides gardening, if anybody's interested, we have a very active bocce league. The meeting for that is actually taking place tomorrow. That is a program that Kelly manages, so if you're interested in playing bocce, please contact us. We also run Atlantic City trips the third Tuesday of every month. We just had one yesterday. And we actually had a busload of winners. They came back with Trump's money. Woohoo! So it does happen once in a while, but we do run monthly trips to Atlantic City. Okay, now in summary, just bear with me, this is my last thing, and then I am done. Give me 1 minute. 1 minute, that's all I need. This is my poem, The Little Plant, just to wrap up our gardening presentation. In the heart of a seed, buried deep, so deep, a tiny plant lay fast asleep. Wake, said the sunshine, and creep to the light. Wake, said the voice of the raindrops bright. The little plant heard and it rose to see what the wonderful outside world might be. The reason I read that to you is because upon your departure from this seminar, we have plants for everyone that we hope you enjoy. So God bless you. Thank you for your patience, and think about gardening.